Picture this. A crowded subway car in the heart of a bustling city, the air thick with the hum of conversation and the clatter of the train. People are packed in tight, some staring at their phones, others just trying to get through the ride. In the middle of it all, a young black teen, maybe 17, stands near the back, his backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds dangling from his ears. He's just another kid on his way home from school, or so you'd think. Across from him, a pregnant white woman struggles to keep her balance as the train sways, her face tired, her hands gripping the pole for dear life. Nobody seems to notice her, or maybe they just don't care. But this kid, he notices. Without a second thought, he steps forward, flashes a shy smile, and offers her a seat. It's a small gesture, the kind you might see any day and forget just as quick. But what happens next? It's the kind of moment that changes everything. She sits down, looks at him with something like gratitude, or maybe something more, and slips a folded note into his hand. He doesn't open it right away. Maybe he's too surprised, or maybe he's just trying to play it cool. But when he finally does, what's written on that piece of paper turns his world upside down. What was in that note? Why did she give it to him? And how does a single act of kindness on a random Tuesday afternoon spiral into a story that's still got people talking years later? Let's rewind a bit. That teen, let's call him Marcus for now, wasn't looking for anything special that day. He was just a regular high school kid, living in a neighborhood where you keep your head down and your guard up. He's got dreams, sure, but they're the kind that feel out of reach when you're scraping by, when your mom's working 2 jobs and the bills keep piling up. Marcus is the kind of guy who doesn't make a big deal out of doing the right thing. He's not perfect, nobody is, but he's got a good heart. You can see it in the way he helps his little sister with her homework or checks in on his grandma after school. That day on the subway, he didn't think twice about giving up his seat. It was just what you do, you know? But the woman he helped, she wasn't just any stranger. There was something about her, something in her eyes, maybe, or the way she held that note like it was the most important thing she'd ever written. She didn't say much, just a quiet thank you before she pressed the paper into his palm and looked away. Marcus tucked it into his pocket, his mind already half on something else. Maybe he thought it was just a thank you note or some random scribble. But when he got home that night and unfolded it, his hands started shaking. The words on that page weren't just a message. They were a key to something bigger, something he never could have seen coming. Now, let's talk about her for a second. The woman on the subway. She's a mystery wrapped in a plain coat, her face pale and her belly round with a baby on the way. She's older than Marcus, maybe in her late 20s or early 30s, with the kind of tired that comes from carrying more than just a pregnancy. There's a story behind her, one you can almost feel in the way she moves, careful and deliberate. Like she's guarding something. Was she running from something? Or running toward it? Nobody on that train knew her name, and Marcus sure didn't. But when she handed him that note, it wasn't random. She saw something in him, something that made her choose him out of all the people in that crowded car. Maybe it was his kindness, or maybe it was something else entirely. Whatever it was, that note wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a spark, the kind that starts a fire you can't put out. And trust me, what happened after Marcus read it? It's the kind of thing that makes your jaw drop and your heart race all at once. Here's the thing about moments like this. They don't happen in a vacuum. That subway car, that city, that day, it's all part of a bigger picture. Marcus wasn't just a kid giving up his seat. He was a kid living in a world where people don't always look out for each other, where a small act of kindness can stand out like a neon sign in the dark. And that woman? She wasn't just a stranger passing through. She was carrying a secret, one that would unravel in ways nobody could have predicted. The note she gave Marcus wasn't just words on a page. It was a map, a clue, a doorway to something that would change his life forever. Was it money? A warning? A promise? Or something so much bigger that even saying it out loud feels impossible? The truth is, what Marcus found in that note sent him on a path he never expected, a path that would lead him to places he'd never been, people he'd never met, and truths he wasn't ready to face. And 6 years later, the ripple effect of that one moment on the subway is still haunting the people who know the story. Imagine being Marcus, standing there in your bedroom, staring at this piece of paper that's suddenly heavier than anything you've ever held. Your heart's pounding, your mind's racing, and you're trying to make sense of what you're reading. Is it real? Is it a joke? Should you tell someone or keep it to yourself? Every choice you make from that moment on feels like it could prisma de colores, like you're painting on a canvas of infinite possibilities. And that's where this story takes a turn, because Marcus's next step wasn't just about him anymore. It was about a woman, a note, and a secret that would pull him into a world he never imagined. What was in that note? Where did it lead him? And why, 6 years later, are people still talking about what happened? Stick around, because you're not going to believe what happens next. Marcus stood frozen in his bedroom, the note still clutched in his hand, the words blurring as he read them again. The paper was plain, torn from a notebook, but the handwriting was careful, almost urgent, like whoever wrote it was afraid they'd run out of time. He didn't know what he'd expected, maybe a thank you, maybe a phone number, maybe even a random doodle, but not this. Not a message that felt like it was pulling him into something way bigger than himself. His room, with its cracked walls and posters peeling at the edges, suddenly felt too small, like the air was pressing in on him. He glanced at the door, half expecting someone to burst in and explain it all, but it was just him, the hum of the city outside his window, and the weight of those words. He stuffed the note into his pocket, his heart thudding, and told himself he'd deal with it tomorrow. But deep down, he knew there was no ignoring this. Whatever that woman on the subway had handed him, it wasn't just a note, it was a fuse, and it was already lit. Let's step back for a second and talk about Marcus. He was 17, a junior at a high school where the hallways smelled like old sneakers and the lunchroom was always too loud. He wasn't the kid who stood out, not the star athlete, not the class clown, not the one getting straight A's. He was just Marcus. Tall, lanky, with a quick smile that hid how much he was always thinking. He lived with his mom, Tanya, in a third-floor walk-up that creaked with every step. His dad wasn't around, hadn't been since Marcus was little, and Tanya worked long hours at a diner downtown, her hands always smelling faintly of coffee and grease. Marcus helped out where he could, picking up his little sister, Jada, from school, or running errands for their neighbor, Mrs. Carter, who paid him in homemade cookies and stories about the old days. He wasn't perfect. He'd gotten into trouble a couple of times, nothing major, just dumb kid stuff like sneaking out to meet friends or skipping class to hang out at the arcade. But he had a good heart, the kind that made him give up his seat on a crowded subway without thinking twice. That's who he was when he met that woman, when he took that note, when his life started to shift in ways he couldn't yet understand. The woman, though, she was harder to pin down. Marcus kept replaying the moment in his head, trying to piece her together. She'd been dressed plainly, a gray coat over a loose sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her face was pale, almost too pale, like she hadn't slept in days, and her eyes had this intensity, like she was looking right through him. She hadn't said much, just that soft thank you before handing him the note, but there was something about her that stuck with him. Maybe it was the way her hands trembled just a little, or the way she glanced around the subway car, like she was checking for someone. Marcus didn't know her story, but he could feel it. She was carrying something heavy, something that made her choose him. Why him? He wasn't sure, but the note was proof it wasn't random. And as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, the words from the note kept looping in his mind, pulling him deeper into a mystery he wasn't ready for. The next morning, Marcus woke up with a knot in his stomach. He hadn't slept much, his dreams a jumble of subway cars and scribbled handwriting. He pulled the note from his pocket, smoothing it out on his desk. The words were simple, but they didn't make sense. Not yet. They weren't an address or a phone number, not a name or a clear instruction. It was more like a riddle, a string of phrases that felt like they were pointing to something, but what? He read it again, whispering the words under his breath, as if saying them out loud would make them clearer. Find the place where the river meets the sky. Ask for the one who waits. Tell no one. That was it. No signature, no explanation, just those cryptic lines. He turned the paper over, hoping for something else, but it was blank. His first instinct was to show it to his mom, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the tell no one part, or maybe it was just a gut feeling that this was his to figure out. Either way, he folded it back up and shoved it into his wallet, right next to the $5 he had left from lunch money. School that day was a blur. Marcus sat through algebra and history, his mind somewhere else entirely. His best friend, Dre, noticed something was off. Dre was the kind of guy who could talk his way out of anything with a laugh that filled up a room. "Yo, Marcus, you good?" he asked at lunch, stealing a fry from Marcus's tray. Marcus just nodded, forcing a grin, but his thoughts were on the note, on the woman, on what the place where the river meets the sky could even mean. He thought about searching online, but where do you start with something like that? It wasn't like he could just Google, "weird note from subway lady." By the time the final bell rang, he was itching to do something, anything, to figure it out. He told Dre he had to run an errand and headed to the library, figuring it was as good a place as any to start digging. The library was quiet, the kind of place where the air smelled like old books and dust. Marcus found a computer in the corner and started searching, typing in phrases from the note, hoping for a hit. River Meets the Sky brought up a million results, song lyrics, poetry, even a travel blog about a lake in Colorado. None of it seemed right. He tried Ask for the One Who Waits, but that was even worse, just a bunch of random quotes and movie references. He leaned back in the chair, frustrated, his fingers tapping on Ascendant. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin crawl, but nobody in that subway car knew the weight of the moment. Ascendant. Marcus wasn't looking for trouble, just a seat, but that note was about to pull him into a world he didn't understand. And now, sitting in the library, staring at a computer screen, he was starting to realize this was no ordinary day. The words on that note weren't just a thank you. They were a call to something bigger, something that would change everything. But what was it? And why did it feel like the whole city was holding its breath, waiting for him to figure it out? Marcus leaned back in the library chair, the computer screen's glow casting shadows on his face. The words from the note: "Find a place where the river meets the sky. Ask for the one who waits. Tell no one," kept looping in his head like a song stuck on repeat. He'd spent an hour searching online, chasing dead ends, and his frustration was starting to feel like a weight on his chest. The library was closing soon, the librarian giving him that look that meant, wrap it up. He logged off, grabbed his backpack, and stepped out into the city's evening hum. The streets were alive with noise, car horns, distant sirens, people rushing past with their own problems. Marcus felt like he was carrying a secret bigger than all of it, a secret he didn't even understand yet. He pulled his hoodie up, the note tucked safe in his wallet, and started walking home. But something told him he wasn't alone. A quick glance over his shoulder showed nothing, just the usual crowd, but the hairs on his neck stood up. Was someone watching him? Or was he just paranoid, the note messing with his head? Back at home, his mom, Tanya, was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of spaghetti, the smell filling their small apartment. Jada, his 8-year-old sister, was sprawled on the couch, coloring in a book with half the crayons missing. "You're late," Tanya called out, not looking up. "You better not be hanging with those boys from the corner." Marcus mumbled something about the library, dodging her eyes. He loved his mom, but she had a way of seeing right through him, and he wasn't ready to talk about the note.
"Not yet."
"Tell no one," it said, and even though he didn't know why, he felt like he had to listen. He grabbed a plate of spaghetti and sat with Jada, half listening as she rambled about her day at school. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying the subway, the woman's tired face, the way her hand shook when she handed him the note. He kept thinking about her eyes. There was something in them, like fear mixed with hope.
Who was she?
And what did she want from him? Meanwhile, across town, in a dim office with flickering fluorescent lights, someone else was thinking about that same woman. Clara, her real name, though Marcus didn't know it yet, sat at a cluttered desk, her fingers tapping nervously on a chipped coffee mug. She was 29, pregnant, and alone, her life a tangle of choices she couldn't undo. The note she'd given Marcus wasn't a whim. It was a desperate move, a last-ditch effort to pass on something she couldn't carry anymore. Clara had been running for months, maybe years, though it felt like forever. She didn't trust many people, but when she saw Marcus on that subway, saw him give up his seat without hesitation, something clicked. He was young, sure, but there was a kindness in him, a steadiness she hadn't seen in a long time. She'd written the note in a hurry, her hands shaking, knowing it might be her only chance. Now, sitting in that office, she wondered if she'd made a mistake. Had she put that kid in danger? Or was he her only hope? Clara glanced at the door, half expecting it to burst open. She wasn't safe here, not really, but she had nowhere else to go. Back in Marcus's world, the note was starting to feel like a puzzle he couldn't put down. The next day, he skipped his last class, something he'd get an earful for later, and headed to the riverfront. The note said, "Where the river meets the sky," and the city's river was the only clue he had. The water was murky, reflecting the gray clouds overhead, and the skyline stretched out like a jagged line. Was this the place? He walked along the path, his sneakers crunching on gravel, looking for anything that might fit. A sign? A person? Someone waiting? The note's words echoed in his mind, but nothing stood out. Just joggers, dog walkers, and a guy playing saxophone for tips. Marcus felt a pang of doubt. Maybe the note was a prank, or maybe the woman was just confused. But then he saw it, a small plaque near the water, half hidden by weeds. It read Skyline Point, with some faded history about the city's founding. His pulse quickened. Was this it? The place where the river meets the sky? He stood there, staring at the plaque, feeling like he was on the edge of something. The note said to ask for the one who waits. But who? There was no one around who looked like they were waiting for anything, just regular people going about their day. Marcus felt a mix of excitement and fear, like he was about to step off a cliff. He pulled out his phone, thinking about texting Dre for backup, but stopped himself. Tell no one. The words felt heavier now, like a warning. He scanned the area again, his eyes landing on an old man sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons. The guy looked harmless, just a regular grandpa type in a worn coat, but something about him felt off. Like he was watching Marcus without watching him. Marcus's stomach twisted. He wasn't sure if he should approach or walk away. Before he could decide, his phone buzzed, a text from his mom. Get home now. We need to talk. His heart sank. Had she found out he skipped class? Or was it something else? Across the city, Clara was moving fast. She'd left the office, her bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes darting to every shadow. She wasn't just running from her past, she was running from people. People who wanted what she knew, what she'd carried for too long. The note was her way of passing the torch, but now she wasn't sure if she'd done the right thing. Marcus was just a kid, after all. Could he handle it? She thought back to the subway, to the moment she decided to trust him. It wasn't just his kindness. It was the way he carried himself, like he'd already seen enough to know the world wasn't always fair, but he still tried to do right. Clara ducked into a coffee shop, her hands shaking as she ordered a tea she wouldn't drink. She needed to keep moving, but she couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. Had he read the note? Had he figured it out? And most importantly, was he safe? Back at the riverfront, Marcus shoved his phone in his pocket and started walking home, the old man on the bench still lingering in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that the note had pulled him into something bigger than he could handle. When he got home, Tanya was waiting, her arms crossed, her face a mix of worry and frustration. "Where you been, Marcus?" she asked, her voice sharp but tired. He mumbled something about the library again, but she wasn't buying it. "You're acting different," she said, her eyes narrowing. "What's going on?" Marcus wanted to tell her about the note, the woman, the weird feeling in his gut, but the words stuck in his throat. Tell no one. He just shrugged and said he was fine, but Tanya didn't let it go. "I know you, boy," she said. "You're carrying something. Don't let it eat you up." Her words hit harder than he expected, but he just nodded and headed to his room, the note burning a hole in his pocket. That night, Marcus lay awake, the city's sounds filtering through his window. He kept thinking about the plaque at Skyline Point, the old man, the note's cryptic words. He was starting to see connections, or maybe he was just imagining them. The woman on the subway hadn't been random. She'd chosen him for a reason.
But why?
And who was the one who waits? He thought about the old man again, his calm, almost too calm, way of sitting there. Was he involved? Or was Marcus just jumping at shadows? The more he thought about it, the more questions he had. What if the note was a warning? What if it was a trap? Or what if it was something else entirely, something that could change his life, his family's life, for good? He didn't know yet, but he was starting to realize one thing. This wasn't just about him anymore. Whatever he'd stumbled into, it was bigger than one kid, one note, one moment on a subway. And as he drifted off to sleep, the city outside seemed to hum with secrets, waiting for him to uncover them. Or for them to uncover him. Marcus woke up with a jolt, his heart racing like he'd been running in his dreams. The note was still in his wallet, tucked under his pillow like a talisman, but it felt heavier now, like it was pulling him towards something he couldn't see. The city outside his window was quiet in the early morning, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. He couldn't shake the image of the old man at Skyline Point, the way his eyes seemed to linger just a second too long. Was he the one who waits? Or was Marcus reading too much into it, letting the note twist his thoughts into knots? He got dressed quickly, skipping breakfast, and told himself he'd go back to the riverfront today. He had to know. The note's words. Find a place where the river meets the sky. Ask for the one who waits. Tell no one. Were like a drumbeat in his head, pushing him forward even as his gut screamed to slow down. At school, Marcus was a mess. He barely heard his teachers, his eyes darting to the clock every few minutes. Dre cornered him in the hallway, his usual grin replaced with a frown. Man, you're acting weird, Dre said, leaning against a locker. You dodging me, or what? Marcus wanted to spill everything. The note, the woman, the plaque at Skyline Point, but the tell no one part stopped him cold. He just shrugged, muttering something about being tired, but Dre wasn't fooled. Whatever it is, you know I got your back, Dre said, his voice low. Marcus nodded, but as he walked away, he felt a pang of guilt. Keeping secrets wasn't his style, especially from Dre, who'd been his ride-or-die since middle school. But this felt different, like telling anyone would break something fragile, something he didn't even understand yet. By the time the final bell rang, Marcus was already halfway out the door, his backpack bouncing as he headed for the river. Across town, Clara was unraveling. She'd spent the night in a cheap motel, the kind with thin walls and a flickering neon sign outside. She hadn't slept, not really, just a few fitful hours, her dreams haunted by faces she couldn't forget. The note she'd given Marcus was her last play, a desperate move to keep her secret safe without dragging anyone else into her mess. But now doubt was creeping in. Had she been reckless, trusting a kid she didn't know? She thought back to the subway, to Marcus's quiet kindness, the way he'd given up his seat without expecting anything. It wasn't just the act, it was the way he carried himself, like he was used to doing the right thing even when no one was watching. But now, sitting on the edge of the motel bed, her hands cradling her pregnant belly, Clara felt the weight of her choice. She'd passed her burden to Marcus, but what if it was too much? What if they were already watching him? Back at Skyline Point, Marcus stood by the plaque, the river glinting under the afternoon sun. The place felt different today, colder, sharper, like the air was charged with something he couldn't name. He scanned the area, looking for the old man from yesterday, but the bench was empty. Just a few joggers and a couple of kids tossing a frisbee. He felt a mix of relief and disappointment, like he'd been ready for a fight that wasn't coming. Then he saw her. A woman, not the one from the subway, but someone new, standing near the water's edge. She was tall, dressed in a dark jacket, her hair tucked under a cap. She wasn't doing anything suspicious, just staring at the river, but something about her made Marcus's skin prickle. He took a step closer, his heart pounding, and cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, his voice shakier than he wanted. You waiting for someone?" The woman turned, her eyes sharp and unreadable. For a second, Marcus thought she might smile, but instead, she tilted her head, studying him.
Depends, she said.
You looking for someone? Marcus froze.
Was this it?
Was she the one who waits? The note didn't say what to do next, and now he was standing here, feeling like he'd walked into a game with no rules. He stammered something about the river, trying to play it cool, but the woman's gaze didn't waver. You're Marcus, right? She said, and his stomach dropped. How did she know his name? He hadn't told anyone, not even Dre. He took a step back, his mind racing. Who are you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket, and for one heart-stopping moment, Marcus thought she might pull out a weapon. But it was just a phone. She typed something quickly, her eyes flicking up to meet his. You've got something that doesn't belong to you, she said. And you need to be careful. Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like she'd never been there. Marcus stood there, his pulse hammering in his ears. The note felt like a live wire in his pocket, dangerous and alive. He wanted to run after the woman, demand answers, but his legs wouldn't move. Instead, he pulled out the note and read it again, as if the words might suddenly make sense. Find the place where the river meets the sky. Ask for the one who waits. Tell no one. He'd found the place, maybe even the person, but now what? The woman's words, you've got something that doesn't belong to you, echoed in his head, each one heavier than the last. What did she mean? Was the note stolen? Was it dangerous? And how did she know his name? He looked around, half expecting to see her watching from a distance, or maybe the old man from yesterday, or someone else entirely. The riverfront, with its calm water and scattered people, suddenly felt like a stage, and Marcus was the only one who didn't know the script. Back at the motel, Clara was packing her bag, her movements quick and frantic. She'd heard whispers, nothing concrete, but enough to know she wasn't safe. The people she was running from were close, closer than they'd been in months. She thought about Marcus, about the note, about the risk she'd taken. It wasn't just about her anymore. There was the baby to think about, the life she was trying to protect. The note was her way out, a chance to pass on what she knew without putting anyone else in the crosshairs. But now she wasn't so sure. She'd seen the way Marcus looked at her on the subway, curious but cautious, like he could sense the weight of her secret. Had she been wrong to trust him? She zipped her bag and glanced at the door, her heart racing. She needed to find Gina de Cambio, a sudden shift in her thoughts. She needed to find Marcus, to warn him, but how? She didn't even know his name, just his face, his kind eyes, the way he'd stood up for her without a second thought. She checked her phone, her fingers trembling as she considered her options. There was a number she could call, someone who might help, but it was a risk. Everything was a risk now. Marcus was halfway home when his phone buzzed again. Another text from his mom. Where are you? Call me now. He winced, knowing he was in for it. Tanya wasn't the type to let things slide, and he'd been dodging her too much lately. But as he dialed her number, his mind was still on the woman by the river, her cryptic warning, the way she knew his name. Marcus, you better have a good explanation. Tanya's voice came through the phone, sharp and worried. He mumbled an apology, said he was on his way, but his voice sounded distant, even to himself. When he hung up, he felt the note in his pocket again, like it was burning through the fabric. He needed answers, but every step he took seemed to pull him deeper into a maze with no exit. The city felt different now, like it was watching him, waiting for his next move. At home, Tanya was waiting, her arms crossed, her eyes searching his face. Talk to me, Marcus, she said, softer this time. He wanted to tell her everything, to let her make sense of it like she always did, but the note's warning stopped him. Tell no one. Instead, he said he was just stressed about school, a lie that tasted bitter. Tanya didn't push, but her silence was worse than her questions. As Marcus headed to his room, he pulled out the note again, his hands shaking. The words hadn't changed, but they felt more urgent now, like a countdown. He thought about the woman on the subway, the woman by the river, the old man on the bench. Were they connected? Was the note a key to something huge, or was it a trap leading him straight to trouble? He didn't know, but he was running out of time to figure it out. The city outside his window seemed to pulse with secrets, and Marcus was standing on the edge of something massive, something that could swallow him whole, or change everything. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, the note spread out in front of him, its creased edges worn from being handled so much. The city's hum outside his window felt louder tonight, like it was pressing in, demanding his attention. His mom's words echoed in his head, her worry cutting deeper than he wanted to admit. He'd lied to her, something he hated doing, but the note's warning, "Tell no one," felt like a chain around his tongue. He read the words again. Find the place where the river meets the sky. Ask for the one who waits. Tell no one. Every time he thought he was close to understanding, something new threw him off. The woman by the river, the one who knew his name, had left him rattled. Her warning, "You've got something that doesn't belong to you," was like a splinter in his mind, impossible to ignore. And now, as he stared at the note, a new thought hit him. What if the note wasn't meant for him at all? What if he'd stumbled into someone else's story, and now he was caught in the middle? His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Dre, texting a single word. Yo. Marcus hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. He wanted to tell Dre everything, to have someone else make sense of the mess he was in, but the note's words held him back. Instead, he typed back, "What's good?" and waited. Dre's reply came fast. "Meet me at the corner. Got something to show you." Marcus's stomach twisted. Dre wasn't the type to be cryptic, so whatever this was, it felt important. He glanced at the note one last time, then stuffed it back into his wallet and grabbed his jacket. Tanya was in the living room, watching TV with Jada, and Marcus mumbled something about getting some air. His mom's eyes followed him to the door, sharp with that mom instinct that always knew when something was off, but she didn't stop him. As he stepped into the cool night air, Marcus felt like he was crossing a line, one he couldn't come back from. The corner was just a block away, where the bodega's neon sign flickered and kids from the neighborhood hung out, their laughter cutting through the dark. Dre was there, leaning against a streetlight, his hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets. "Took you long enough," Dre said, but his usual grin was gone, replaced by a look Marcus didn't recognize. Nervous, maybe even scared. "What's up?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Dre glanced around, like he was checking for eavesdroppers, then pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a photo. It was grainy, taken at night, but Marcus recognized the spot immediately, Skyline Point, the plaque by the river. In the photo, the old man from the bench was there, talking to someone in a dark jacket. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. It was the woman from earlier, the one who'd known his name. "I was there last night," Dre said, his voice low. "Saw them."
They were talking about you, man.
"Said your name, clear as day." Marcus felt the world tilt. "What do you mean, talking about me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dre shrugged, but his eyes were serious.
"I don't know, man.
"I was just passing through, taking a shortcut. Heard them say Marcus and something about a note. I didn't stick around to hear more. Felt like bad news." Marcus's mind raced. How did Dre end up at Skyline Point?
And why were those two talking about him?
The note felt like a lead weight in his pocket now, tying him to something he didn't understand. "You didn't tell anyone, right?" Marcus asked, his voice sharp. Dre raised his hands, defensive. "Chill, man. I ain't said nothing. But you gotta tell me what's going on. You're in some deep stuff, aren't you?" Marcus wanted to spill it all, but the note's warning stopped him again. Instead, he just shook his head. "I'll figure it out," he said, but the words felt hollow. Across town, Clara was on the move again, her bag slung over her shoulder, her steps quick and quiet. The motel hadn't been safe, not after she'd seen the car parked across the street, its engine idling too long to be a coincidence. She'd known they'd find her eventually, but not this soon. The note she'd given Marcus was supposed to buy her time, to pass the secret to someone who could carry it without knowing its weight. But now she was second-guessing everything. She'd seen Marcus's face on the subway, his quiet strength, his unthinking kindness, and she'd thought he could handle it. But he was just a kid, and the people she was running from didn't care about that. They wanted what she knew, and they'd tear through anyone to get it. Clara slipped into a crowded diner, her eyes scanning the room for familiar faces, none of them friendly. She needed to find Marcus, to warn him, but she didn't even know where to start. All she had was a memory of his face, and a hope that he was smarter than she'd been. Back at the corner, Marcus and Dre stood in uneasy silence, the weight of the photo hanging between them. Marcus's mind was a storm of questions. Who was the woman by the river? Why did she know his name? And what was the old man's deal? He thought back to Skyline Point, to the plaque, to the note's cryptic words. Ask for the one who waits. He thought the woman might be the one, but now he wasn't sure. What if it was the old man? Or someone else entirely? And how did Dre get caught up in this? You gotta stay out of this, Marcus told Dre, his voice firm. Dre laughed, but it was forced. Too late, man. I'm already in it. Before Marcus could argue, a car rolled by, slow and deliberate, its windows tinted black. Marcus's heart thudded. He grabbed Dre's arm, pulling him into the bodega's shadow. The car didn't stop, but it didn't need to. Marcus felt its presence like a warning, like the city itself was closing in. When Marcus got home, Tanya was waiting, her arms crossed, her face a mix of worry and anger. You're gonna tell me what's going on, Marcus, she said, her voice low but unyielding. He opened his mouth to lie again, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't just his mom right now. She was the woman who'd raised him alone, who'd worked double shifts to keep them afloat, who'd always known when he was hiding something. I'm fine, he said, but his voice cracked, and Tanya's expression softened. You're not fine, she said. I see it in your face. Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone. For a moment, Marcus almost broke. He wanted to show her the note, to tell her about the woman on the subway, the woman by the river, Dre's photo, the car that felt like a threat. But tell no one stopped him again, like a wall he couldn't climb. Instead, he hugged her, quick and tight, and mumbled something about being tired. As he headed to his room, he felt her eyes on his back, heavy with unspoken questions. In his room, Marcus pulled out the note, his hand shaking. The words hadn't changed, but they felt different now, like they were alive, pulsing with urgency. He thought about Dre's photo, the old man and the woman, their voices mentioning his name. And then, like a lightning bolt, a new thought hit him, a second twist that made his blood run cold. What if the note wasn't just a message? What if it was a key, a literal key to something hidden? He turned the paper over, holding it up to the light, and there it was, a faint watermark, barely visible, shaped like a small, intricate symbol. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, like a clue he'd missed. His heart raced as he grabbed his phone, snapping a picture of the symbol and searching online. The results were sparse, but one hit caught his eye, an old article about a forgotten city landmark, a lockbox hidden in plain sight, marked with a symbol just like the one on the note. Marcus's breath caught. Was this what the note was pointing to? And if it was, what was inside that lockbox? Something worth running for, or something worth killing for. The city outside seemed to hum louder, its secrets closing in, and Marcus knew he was running out of time to find out. Marcus's hands trembled as he stared at the faint watermark on the note, the intricate symbol glowing under the dim light of his desk lamp. His phone screen showed the article he'd found, a blurry photo of a lockbox embedded in a wall near Skyline Point, marked with the same symbol. The article called it a forgotten relic, a piece of city history tied to an old community project, but Marcus knew better. This wasn't just some dusty artifact, it was the key to everything, the note, the woman on the subway, the cryptic warnings. His heart pounded as he grabbed his jacket, slipping out of the apartment before Tanya could ask where he was going. The city felt alive tonight, its streets buzzing with a restless energy that matched his own. He had to get to that lockbox, to find out what was inside before anyone else did. The note's words, find the place where the river meets the sky. Ask for the one who waits. Tell no one. Felt like a ticking clock, pushing him toward a truth he wasn't sure he was ready for. The riverfront was quiet when Marcus arrived, the moon casting long shadows over the water. Skyline Point looked different at night, the plaque barely visible in the dark. He scanned the area, his eyes landing on a low stone wall near the water's edge, half hidden by overgrown vines. That's where the article said the lockbox was. His pulse raced as he approached, his sneakers silent on the gravel. He brushed the vines aside, revealing a rusted metal panel with the same symbol etched into it. This was it. His fingers fumbled with the note, checking the symbol again, making sure he wasn't imagining things. He pressed on the panel, half expecting it to be stuck, but it gave way with a soft click, revealing a small, weathered lockbox. His breath caught. There was no keyhole, just a slot where the note might fit. He hesitated, his mind flashing to the woman by the river, her warning about the note not belonging to him. But he was too far in now. He slid the note into the slot, and with a low grind, the lockbox opened. Inside was a small, leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed but intact. Marcus's hands shook as he flipped it open, his eyes scanning the handwritten entries. It wasn't just a diary. It was a record, a detailed account of names, dates, and transactions, written in the same careful handwriting as the note. His stomach dropped as he recognized some of the names: local business owners, a city council member, even a cop who patrolled his neighborhood. This was big, bigger than he'd imagined. The journal documented a network of payoffs, favors, and secrets, tying together people who shouldn't be connected. Marcus's mind raced back to the woman on the subway, Clara, though he didn't know her name yet. She'd been running from this, he realized, and she'd chosen him to carry it forward.
But why?
And who was the one who waits? Before he could process it, a shadow moved behind him, and he spun around, the journal clutched to his chest. It was the old man from the bench, his face half lit by the moonlight, his eyes sharp and unreadable. "You found it," he said, his voice low and calm, like he'd been expecting this. Marcus took a step back, his heart hammering. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice shaking. The old man didn't move, just tilted his head, studying Marcus like he was a puzzle. "I'm the one who waits," he said simply. Marcus's mind reeled. This was the person the note meant? The old man stepped closer, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. "She trusted you," he said. "Clara. She knew you'd figure it out." Marcus's breath hitched at the name, Clara. The woman from the subway. "What is this?" he asked, holding up the journal. The old man's eyes softened, but there was a weight to them, like he'd carried this secret for too long. "It's the truth," he said. "About this city, about the people who run it, and they'll do anything to keep it hidden." Before Marcus could ask more, headlights cut through the darkness, and a car screeched to a stop nearby. The woman from the river, the one who'd known his name, stepped out, her face tight with urgency. "We don't have time," she said, her voice sharp. "They're coming." Marcus's heart pounded as he looked between her and the old man. "Who's coming?" he asked, but the answer was already clear. The people in the journal, the ones Clara had been running from, the ones who'd been watching him. The old man grabbed Marcus's arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You need to go," he said. "Take the journal. Get it to someone you trust." Marcus hesitated, his mind spinning. He thought of Dre, of Tanya, of the life he'd known just days ago, before the note turned everything upside down. "Why me?" he asked, his voice breaking. The old man's eyes met his, steady and sure. "Because you're the kind of person who gives up his seat," he said. "That's why she chose you." Marcus didn't have time to argue. Footsteps echoed in the distance, heavy and fast, and the woman from the river pulled a phone from her pocket, typing furiously. "I've got someone who can help," she said, her voice tense. "But you need to move, now." Marcus clutched the journal, his mind racing. He thought of Clara, pregnant and scared, passing him the note like it was her last hope. He thought of Dre, who'd gotten tangled in this without even knowing. And he thought of Tanya, waiting at home, probably sensing something was wrong. He took off running, the journal tucked under his jacket, the riverfront blurring past him. The city felt like a living thing now, its streets closing in, its secrets chasing him. He didn't know who to trust, but he knew he couldn't stop. The journal was his responsibility now, and whatever it held, It was worth everything Clara had risked. As Marcus disappeared into the night, the woman from the river turned to the old man, her face pale. "You think you can do it?" she asked. The old man didn't answer right away, just watched the spot where Marcus had been. "He's got a chance," he said finally. "More than most." Back at home, Marcus slipped into his room, his chest heaving, the journal hidden under his mattress. He didn't sleep that night, his mind too full of questions, of fear, of the weight of what he'd found. The next morning he made a choice. He called Dre, told him to meet at the library, and handed him a copy of the journal's first page. "Don't ask," Marcus said. "Just keep this safe." Dre nodded, his eyes wide, sensing the gravity, without needing the details. Marcus then went to Tanya, his heart heavy, and told her just enough about the note, the journal, the danger. She listened, her face unreadable, then pulled him into a hug. "We'll figure it out," she said. "Together." But just as the pieces seemed to fall into place, a final twist hit like a punch to the gut. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a photo of Clara standing on a street corner, her face bruised, her eyes pleading. Below it, a single line. "Give us the journal, or she's gone." Marcus's blood ran cold. Clara was alive, but she was in their hands. The journal wasn't just a secret, it was a bargaining chip, and now Marcus had to choose, hand it over and save her, or protect the truth and risk losing everything. The city outside his window seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his next move, and Marcus knew, whatever he decided, nothing would ever be the same. Marcus stared at the text on his phone, the photo of Clara, bruised, scared, her eyes pleading, burning into his mind. The words below it, "Give us the journal or she's gone," felt like a knife twisting in his gut. His room, usually a safe haven with its familiar posters and cluttered desk, now felt like a trap closing in. The journal, still hidden under his mattress, was no longer just a secret. It was a life or death choice. He could feel the city outside his window, its pulse matching his racing heart, as if it knew the weight of what he held. Tanya's hug lingered in his memory, her promise to figure this out together giving him a flicker of strength, but now he faced a decision that could break everything. Save Clara, a woman he barely knew, or protect the journal's truth, which could expose a network of corruption bigger than he'd ever imagined. His hands shook as he typed a reply, stalling for time. "Where do I bring it?" He hit send, his breath shallow, knowing he was stepping into the lion's den. Across town, Clara sat in a dimly lit room, her wrists bound with zip ties, the air thick with the smell of damp concrete. She'd been running for so long, trying to outpace the people who wanted the journal's secrets buried. Giving the note to Marcus on that subway had been her last desperate act, a way to pass the truth to someone who might do what she couldn't. Now, trapped in this cold, windowless space, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The men who'd taken her, a tall one with a scar across his cheek and another who never spoke, hadn't hurt her yet, but their eyes told her they wouldn't hesitate. Her baby kicked, a reminder of why she'd fought so hard to keep the journal out of their hands. It wasn't just about her. It was about a future she wanted to believe in. She closed her eyes, picturing Marcus's face, his quiet kindness on the subway, and prayed he was strong enough to finish what she'd started. Back at home, Marcus paced his room, the journal in his hands. He'd read more of it now, each page a deeper dive into a web of corruption, names of people who'd taken bribes, fixed deals, silenced voices. A local developer who'd pushed families out of their homes for a shiny new high-rise. A cop who looked the other way for cash. Even a charity director skimming donations meant for kids like Jada. It was the kind of truth that could change the city, but it came with a cost. Marcus thought of Clara, her face in that photo, and his stomach churned. He couldn't just hand the journal over, but he couldn't let her die either. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. His phone buzzed with a reply, Skyline Point. Midnight. Come alone. The words sent a chill down his spine. Skyline Point again, the place where the river meets the sky, where this all began. He glanced at the clock. 3 hours to go. Marcus knew he couldn't do this alone. Not anymore. He called Dre, his voice low as he explained the journal, the photo, the meeting. Dre didn't hesitate. "I'm coming with you," he said, his usual bravado softened by worry. Marcus wanted to argue, to keep Dre out of danger, but he knew he needed backup. He also needed Tanya. He found her in the kitchen, washing dishes, her shoulders tense like she was carrying the world. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "I need to tell you something." He laid it all out, the note, the journal, Clara, the threat. Tanya listened, her face hardening with every word, but when he finished, she didn't yell or cry. Instead, she wiped her hands on a dish towel and said, "We're not losing you to this, Marcus. We'll fix it." Her strength anchored him, and together, they came up with a plan, not perfect, but enough to give him a shot. The plan was simple, but risky. Marcus would go to Skyline Point with a decoy, a fake journal, just a notebook from his room filled with random notes. Dre would stay hidden nearby, ready to call for help if things went south. Tanya would wait at home, ready to contact a friend of hers, a reporter named Lena, who'd been digging into city corruption for years. Marcus had copied the journal's key pages, sending them to Lena's email with a note. "If I don't make it, publish this." It was a long shot, but it was all he had. As he headed to Skyline Point, the real journal tucked safely in a plastic bag under his bed, Marcus felt the weight of every choice he'd made since that subway ride. The city's lights blurred past him, each one a reminder of the stakes. He wasn't just fighting for Clara, he was fighting for the truth, for his family, for the kind of world he wanted Jada to grow up in. At Skyline Point, the river glittered under the moonlight, calm but menacing. Marcus stood by the plaque, the decoy journal in his backpack, his heart pounding so loud he was sure they'd hear it. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes every sound, a rustling leaf, a distant car, feel like a threat. At exactly midnight, the scarred man from Clara's photo stepped out of the shadows, his face hard, his hand resting on something under his jacket. "You got it?" he asked, his voice like gravel. Marcus nodded, pulling the decoy journal from his bag, his hands steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "Where's Clara?" he asked, trying to sound braver than he felt. The man smirked, gesturing to a car parked nearby. Clara was in the back seat, her hands still bound, her eyes wide with relief and fear when she saw Marcus. "Hand it over," the man said, stepping closer. Marcus held out the decoy, his heart racing. This was the moment. But before the man could take it, another figure emerged, the woman from the river, the one who'd warned Marcus. She wasn't alone this time. The old man from the bench was with her, and behind them, two more figures, their faces hidden in the dark. "Stop," the woman said, her voice sharp. The scarred man froze, his eyes narrowing. "You're out of your depth, Ellen," he said, spitting her name like a curse. Marcus's mind reeled. Ellen, the woman who'd known his name, who'd told him the note didn't belong to him. She was part of this? "Give me the journal, kid," she said, turning to Marcus, her eyes pleading now. "We can end this." Marcus hesitated, the decoy heavy in his hand. Was she with Clara, or with the scarred man? The old man stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "She's right, Marcus. But not for them. For Clara. For the truth." The scarred man laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You think you can just walk away with that?" he said, pulling a gun from under his jacket. Marcus's breath caught, his eyes darting to Clara in the car. She was shaking her head, mouthing something he couldn't make out. Before he could react, Dre's voice cut through the night, a shout from the shadows. "Marcus now." It was the signal. Marcus dropped the decoy and bolted, sprinting toward the river as Dre dialed 911, his voice loud enough to draw attention. The scarred man cursed, lunging for the decoy, but Ellen and the old man moved faster, tackling him to the ground. The other two figures, undercover cops, Marcus realized later, rushed in, cuffing the scarred man as sirens wailed in the distance. Marcus didn't stop running until he reached the edge of Skyline Point, his chest heaving, the river's reflection blurring in his vision. Clara was safe, pulled from the car by one of the cops, her face tear-streaked but alive. Ellen and the old man were talking to the police now, their voices low, explaining something Marcus couldn't hear. He sank to the ground, his hands shaking, the weight of the night crashing over him. Dre appeared beside him, out of breath but grinning. "Told you I had your back," he said, and Marcus managed a weak laugh. When Tanya arrived, summoned by Dre's call, she pulled Marcus into a hug so tight he could barely breathe. "You scare me half to death," she whispered, but her voice was proud, too. Marcus didn't have words yet, just held on to her. The journal's truth safe at home, ready for Lena to expose. In the days that followed, the city buzzed with the story. Lena's article hit the front page, the journal's contents laying bare a network of corruption that rocked the city. Names were named, arrests were made, and the developer, the cop, the charity director, they all faced justice. Clara, now safe, met Marcus at a coffee shop a week later, her baby bump still prominent, her face softer now. "You saved me," she said, her voice quiet. And more than that. She explained her story, how she'd worked for a lawyer who'd uncovered the corruption, how she'd taken the journal when he was killed, how she'd been running ever since. She'd chosen Marcus because of his kindness, because she saw in him what she'd lost. Hope. Marcus listened, his coffee untouched, feeling older than his 17 years. "Why me?" he asked again, and Clara smiled. "Because you're the kind of person who does the right thing, even when it's hard." But just as Marcus thought the story was over, a final twist came, sharp and unexpected. A letter arrived at his apartment, no return address, just a single page inside. It was from Ellen, the woman from the river, who'd vanished after that night. "You did good, Marcus," it read. But the journal was only part of it. There's another piece, hidden where the city's heart beats loudest. Find it and finish what we started. Marcus's heart sank. Another note, another secret, another choice. He looked at Tanya, at Jada coloring on the couch, at the city outside his window. He'd thought he was done, but the truth was, this was just the beginning. The city still held secrets, and Marcus, whether he wanted to or not, was part of them now. As he folded the letter, he felt a spark of something. Fear, yes, but also determination. Whatever came next, he'd face it, not just for Clara or the journal or even himself, but for the people who needed someone to stand up, to give up their seat, to do what was right. The takeaway from Marcus's story isn't just about a note or a journal. It's about the power of a single act of kindness, how it can ripple out and change everything. Marcus was just a kid on a subway, but his choice to help a stranger set him on a path that shook a city. It's a reminder that we all have that power, to stand up, to speak out, to carry the truth even when it's heavy. And as Marcus looked out at the city, its lights twinkling like stars, he knew he'd never see it the same way again. The river still met the sky, the secrets still lingered, but Marcus was ready for whatever came next, for the truth, for the fight.